Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Spring 2015 Civic Leadership Academy. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I wanted to introduce myself. So my name's Sally Stadelman, the girl you've been getting emails from. I'm a community liaison in the Office of Community Affairs. So in my department, I spend my evenings about 4 nights a week out at meetings all over the city, talking to residents, finding out what's going on. I might have seen a couple of you at your local meetings. We also handle all the constituent work for the mayor's office. We were created to, as a one-stop government shop. So when you've got a question, it doesn't really fit in anywhere, you're having trouble finding out what's going on, those calls usually end up with us, and we figure out how to fix them. So I want to introduce our first speaker, Miss Councilwoman Natalia Rudiak. So whenever you're ready, you can come on up. All right.
Thank you.
All right, Councilwoman Rudiak.
Hi, everybody. Okay. This is a strange microphone. Hi, everybody. My name is Natalia Rudiak. I am the city council person from our southernmost neighborhoods. So I represent Carrick, Overbrook, Bon Air, Beachview, Brookline, and a little bit of the southern part of Mount Washington. I also represent McKinley Park and Beltsuber, just the park though. But we work with the Hilltop residents on park planning and things like that. So there is so much that I could cover with regards to city council and how it works. I mean, we could probably, we could fill a 6-week session on just city council. So it's sort of hard to figure out what to distill in 15 minutes, and I'll probably take half of that because I want to get your questions too. So I'll just zip through some of this pretty quickly. But as you know, City Council is divided into 9 City Council districts. They roughly have about 35,000 people each. Every 10 years, they're redistricting because of changing census data. So I represent City Council District 4, and just a little bit about me is that I actually grew up in the city of Pittsburgh. I grew up in Carrick. I live in the neighborhood where I grew up, and obviously represent the district where I grew up. I went to Pittsburgh Public Schools. My background is actually in international development. I wanted to be a diplomat. I mean, I sort of am right now, I guess you could say. And I actually ended up going to graduate school for public policy and management. I also worked for Deloitte Consulting, where I helped implement a financial management information technology system. I ran for office in 2009. I ran for an open seat, and there's a real big difference between politics and governing, and it's quite an experience to run for office. I've given talks where I've talked a little bit about how to do that, but I think it's important to just give a nod to that because running for office is such an incredible experience. And when I ran, there was no one like me who looked like me in city government, who talked like me in city government. I'm the youngest woman elected in the city of Pittsburgh. I'm the first woman elected to represent my district. And so, I just hope that when I go to elementary schools and high schools and colleges, that when young women and men see someone like me, it starts to normalize what an elected official can actually look like. And that's very important to me. When I ran for office, frankly, I didn't have the support of the mayor. I didn't have the support of the ward boss. I didn't have a lot of quote unquote institutional support, but I had a big grassroots campaign. So I door knocked the whole district 3.5 times, spent a lot of time in people's living rooms, a lot of time on people's porches. And I think it's really important as an elected official to do that. I mean, for better or worse, as an elected official, as a candidate, people put their hopes and fears and dreams on you. And it's just amazing that you can start out as a stranger speaking door to door. And then today, some of my closest community volunteers and community leaders are literally people whose doors I knocked on in 2009. So I still take those experiences with me every day as I govern. So again, I was elected in 2009, started in January of 2010, was reelected in 2013. So this is my 6th year on council, my 2nd term. I'm currently the chair of the Finance and Law Committee, so I get a lot more work without more staff, but that's okay. And just as a basic overview of City Council, as I said, there are 9 members. We have a city clerk's office who's responsible for the day-to-day operations of City Council, putting together the agendas, putting together the public hearings, the post agendas. We have meetings twice a week, with the exception of 3 weeks in August. We have meetings on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Tuesdays are where we introduce legislation and we make final votes on legislation. Wednesdays are what we call our standing committee meetings. So it gets a little confusing. We have committees of the whole. So we have, say, the chair of the Public Works. Every council person is the chair of a different committee. So you'll have the chair of the Public Works Committee, the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Clearly, I'm the chair of the Finance and Law Committee, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that is written into our City Council rules. But essentially, every member of council is a member of every committee. So on Wednesdays are where we have our committee meetings, and that's where we discuss legislation in depth. So those meetings can be very, very, very long. Like today, for example, we had a very long meeting. We can talk about a piece of legislation for as long as we want. I tried to introduce speaking limits in 2010. It didn't work. So legislation is introduced through different committees based on the content of the legislation. Again, we discuss them. And some of them are approval of contracts. Some of them are approval of expenditures. Other pieces of legislation, clearly council members can introduce pieces of legislation that they write. There's a little bit of everything. I mean, I'm looking at our agenda today, and it was about nine pages long. We talked about and that's what I love about this job, is that we talked about everything from grant funding to the Knoxville Library to public process for naming public facilities to talking about the process by which police officers are hired to different warrants for the law department. I mean, it really, really runs the gamut. In addition to our Tuesday and Wednesday meetings, we also have what are called post-agenda hearings. So any member can make a motion to hold a post-agenda. And essentially what a post-agenda is an informational hearing where you bring subject matter experts to the table to discuss a particular issue in depth. I just actually proposed paid leave legislation for city employees. And so a few weeks ago, I guess a month or two ago at this point, I held a post agenda on paid leave and why that's valuable and why that's beneficial. Really, you could have a post agenda on anything that you want. So that's interesting. There's also public hearings. And any member can motion for a public hearing on any particular topic. Also, I think this is a little known fact that's written into our rules, but any citizen can actually trigger a public hearing by submitting a petition to the city clerk's office with the name and addresses of 25 registered voters. So if you want to have a public hearing about a stop sign on your street or about a broad citywide issue, you can do that. And there are some items that trigger public hearings, like certain zoning changes or historical nominations. Sometimes public hearings are built into the code. So that's an overview of the kinds of meetings that we have, officially speaking. As far as a typical day, there really is no typical day. I mean, and again, that's what I love about this position, is that it just covers so much ground. So, for example, today, I started my day at 8 a.m. this morning in Rosslyn Farms, where I actually gave a presentation to the Commercial Real Estate Association, where I talked about different investment opportunities in South Pittsburgh. And there were about 30 folks in the room, engineering firms and real estate developers. So I talked a little bit about the Dairy District in Carrick, some buildings on Broadway Avenue that we're trying to market, potential park and ride on Route 51 where we're looking for a developer. Talked a lot about that. Then I had council at 10 a.m. As the Finance and Law Chair, I'm actually responsible for running those meetings and chairing those meetings overall. I got to be on for that. Let's see, then my office actually went to a meeting for the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, which is a state-created financial oversight organization. So they were having one of their quarterly meetings today. So my office was represented there. I also had a meeting today with child care providers and various city directors, because myself and other members of council, the Women's Caucus, we actually created a package of child care legislation late fall. And again, I could probably talk about this for 2 hours, but I won't. But essentially what we're trying to do is increase the quality of child care provision in the city of Pittsburgh. And there's 3 different pieces of legislation that are doing that. And one of the pieces of legislation was to create a task force of child care providers, get them together with city directors, like the Director of Public Safety, the Director of Planning, the Director of Permits and Licensing, sort of as a focus group, so providers can provide feedback on what's working for them in the permitting process, what's not, what kind of public safety issues they're having, et cetera. What we also did is we carved out $250,000 from the budget for a loan/grant program for child care providers to improve their quality of care. And that could be used for everything from, and we're still working out the details, but the idea is that it could be used in everything from buying a stainless steel sink to erecting a fence to professional development. These are things that you need in order to have a certain kind of licensing by the state. So we're trying to bring some underground providers out of the shadows and bring them into licensing and higher quality. So I had a meeting with child care providers for about an hour and a half today with directors, and had a meeting with my staff to talk about different constituent issues. We get a couple thousand calls a year. And again, we work on high-level policy issues in city council offices, and we deal with rats in the vacant lot next to your house. I mean, that's the gamut of the issues that we run. When there's always that tension between focusing on district-specific initiatives and focusing on citywide initiatives, and that's constantly something that my office is trying to balance. So, I mean, there's no sort of easy answer to that, but I'm trying to market the district and different economic development opportunities, but also as the Chair of Finance and Law, I'm trying to balance the budget of $500 million and make sure that we're doing everything we can to think creatively about revenue and cost savings and things like that.
And Council, you're probably good to start with questions.
Okay.
We can do a couple minutes of questions.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, go for it, Mike.
So you had recently met with the Pitt student Democrats, I believe. And, that's wonderful because we're always trying to get the students engaged. But, with such a huge student population that often comes from outside of Pittsburgh, how do you think we can more effectively engage that young population in Pittsburgh politics so that they feel more of a sense of ownership and are more likely to stay as citizens of Pittsburgh?
That is a really, really good question. Part of the challenge is that what I have found as an elected official, and this is just sort of factual, is that when I try to work with the different student associations and things like that, I'll build a relationship with someone, and 2 or 3 years later, they've moved on. So it's sort of hard to find that base. But I get this. The irony is I get the same question from the other side. Like when I go to college, I just was speaking at Chatham University, and I got a question from a student about, well, how do I get involved? How do I get engaged? And there's no magic bullet, but I tell folks to get involved with their local chapters at their university with whatever political affiliation that they have, to obviously get involved, and to get involved with different campaigns that they might be interested in. There's obviously some really great nonprofits in the city that are doing good work to attract college students and keep them here. Pittsburgh Urban Magnet Project is one of them. But I would also argue that by making our cities livable and making our neighborhoods livable for the young people who already live here, that by extension, we're going to have those same amenities to keep some of, out-of-town students here. I remember when I first moved back to Pittsburgh, one of the mantras was, well, we need to keep college students here. We need to keep college students here. And growing up in Carrick, I would think to myself, like, well, what about the people who are already here? What about the young people who already live in our neighborhoods? They need jobs. They need opportunities. They need, things to do, amenities. So, that's my focus in the neighborhoods is doing everything from looking at our recreation centers to summer youth programs to just even quality of life issues to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep young people here.
Thank you. Great. Let's do one more question, and also would one of you guys be able to run and see if the mayor's ready to go? So and then let's one more question. Who goes? All right, go for it.
Hi. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of your core values and how that informs like how you look at legislation and decide whether or not it would be something to pass or not.
So when I first ran for office, I had 3 tenets of my platform. One is to protect our neighborhoods from crime and neglect, 2 is to rebuild our business districts, and 3 is to restore public trust. And I had that on a piece of butcher paper, like in my office, on the back of my door. So anything that I did, it's almost like a strategic plan, right? Like I would think to myself, like, how is this helping one of these tenets? So just as an example, one of the pieces of legislation that I proposed early last year was open data legislation to make all of the city's data open by default. So that means that anything that isn't protected under the right to know, state right to know law could be available to the public. And there's a methodical way that I laid out to do that. But that, by extension, is, I think, a way of restoring public trust and trying to put out as much information as possible so the public can see what we're doing and nothing's like hidden behind a curtain or whatever. I would also say my mother is actually an immigrant to this country. My mother is from Poland, and growing up, I would spend my summers in Poland, where my cousins didn't have as much as I did. And I grew up in a working class family. I didn't really have that much in the first place. But I think that seeing what my family overseas was going through and the lack of freedom and the lack of economic opportunities that they had really reinforced that no matter what country you live in or what zip code you live in, you should never have that lack of opportunity or lack of access to opportunity. So that really hit home to me at an early age. And I think I just sort of grew up with this sense of desiring justice for everybody. So I think that's definitely was an informative experience. And just one more thing, I do have some, guys, these are there's a lot of helpful information in here. You can pass these out. There's some information. These are guides that my district puts out that have some city phone numbers in them. If you live in South Pittsburgh, great. A lot of that information is tailored to you. If you don't, I think it'll still be helpful. But again, that's the type of stuff that my office puts together. Not every office does things a little bit differently, but this is something that my office does and hands out at meetings and things like that. I actually do have some information on South Pittsburgh development opportunities. It's actually the presentation that I gave this morning to the Commercial Real Estate Association. So if anybody's interested in this, I could leave some copies with you if anybody's from South Pittsburgh would be interested to see the kind of things that we're doing. And I think that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rudiak. And we put everything online, so I can always send it to you afterwards. So.
Sounds good. I'll give it to someone.
That's perfect. All right, and up next, the man who needs no introduction, Mayor Bill Peduto.
So it's not a criticism, but are there any veterans or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts in the audience? None? Veteran? So the thing that they always teach you is, here you go.
Oh.
The American flag always goes furthest to the right. Always stands highest, never is put down, always stands straight. Only one to have an eagle as well. And then all the other flags go by order to the left. So if we have the state flag, we'd have the state next, and then Allegheny County, and the city of Pittsburgh. So that's just a little lesson that I learned over in council because we had the flags wrong. And then I remember Tom Murphy had them, and I told his press secretary, Craig Kwasinski, and I said, you know, you have the flags the wrong way. He goes, we like it that way. And they're like, you really don't get a choice. It always is to the right, to the left. So a little lesson that I learned a long time ago because the city had them a different way. And by the way, as you sit here and have William Pitt stare over you, you may wonder who that is. That is not the man who Pittsburgh is named after. We came in and there was a tear in that painting, and so I sent it to the Carnegie Museum of Art and I asked them, hey, can you repair it for me? And they said, hey, here's two things. Number one, that painting's not worth that much. The frame's worth more. Use duct tape. And number two, that's the wrong William Pitt. And so for about the past 80 years, the wrong William Pitt has been in the mayor's office. That's his son. He's known as William the Lesser. And so we're actually, I found a portrait painter in Pittsburgh who's hopefully going to give a nice price. I'm going to use some campaign dollars. And it will be to my donation to the city will be that we'll have the right William Pitt staring down. And all the old dead white guys and Sophie, that's what this room is affectionately known to as in our administration, will be moving out of this office and going down the halls of the mayor's office so that we can use these walls to open it up to Pittsburgh artists, to have Pittsburgh paintings, and to allow them the opportunity to sell their work in a beautiful space that was made for the people. So let's go with a little bit of history about this city, okay? So everyone thinks it's 250 years old, but it isn't. It was about 250 plus years that they decided to call a fort and the area around it after the Prime Minister of England, William Pitt, who had spent a lot of money to be able to tell the French they had to leave and started a war all around the world. It was the First World War. It started right here. And it was at that point that General Forbes said, hey, we should name this place after him, not knowing that And about 20 years later, people in this area would be tired of paying taxes to pay for that war. They'd get tired of paying taxes on tea up in Boston and would start another revolution to get rid of them. But at that time, they thought it was a good idea. Let's name it Pitt, after William Pitt. So we were Pittsburgh. We were like Bridgeville or wherever, the borough or a township. And we ended up with the Scottish spelling of borough, B-O-R-O-U-G-H, which is how we got our H. In 1816, we went to Harrisburg and we said, hey, there are now more people than deer here. We should be a city. No knock against Mount Lebanon. I'm not even going to talk about that. But Harrisburg said, you know what, you're right. And what they did is they gave us that ability back in March of 1816 to become the city of Pittsburgh. And so our heritage as a city, not as a borough, we used to have, instead of a mayor, we had a Burgess. Now we have a Reverend Burgess, but the Burgess ran the borough. And we then, in 1816, had our first mayor. His name was Ebenezer Denny. And Ebenezer was a Revolutionary War hero, fought at the Battle of Yorktown when the British surrendered. And he is in the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson. If you saw the movie, when Mel pulls out that flag that his son had carried and starts charging him, and Cornwallis surrenders, and you see the British waving the white flag. And this isn't a spoiler alert. They lost. So hopefully you learned that like in 5th grade history. But he does this soliloquy. It's the only sound I could hear was the sound in the battlefield of the drummer boy, the most beautiful sound of my life, Ebenezer Denny. And they created this city. And what did they do? They moved out of the fort. They had this area. It was growing. We were building glass. We were doing all these different things and producing these materials. And a few years before that, a couple of guys got into a boat down on Bruno's Island right across from Heinz Field, and their names were Lewis and Clark. And they set out, and they saw this whole big world. And they started saying, maybe it doesn't end where the Ohio River begins or where the Mississippi goes. Maybe we should go all the way out to the Pacific. And then they looked back and they tried to find a place to build it, and that was Pittsburgh. So we started out with glass, and then it was iron. And then along came a process called the Bessemer process, and Andrew Carnegie took that and ran with it, and then it became steel. And from steel to aluminum, and basically we built this country. We built every bridge, every skyscraper. It all came out of here, every automobile. All the pipelines of the industry that became part of a global empire of the United States was basically coming out of Pittsburgh. During World War II, we produced more steel than Germany and Japan combined out of this region. And then we know what happened in 1979. The Pirates won the World Series. Right? Willie Stargell, with your family, pretty great time. The Steelers won their 4th Super Bowl, and Pittsburgh died. We put all our eggs in that one economic basket of manufacturing and building things, and we found ourselves in a global economy, and where that was being produced a lot cheaper other places. And we couldn't sustain, and we didn't invest, and we didn't modernize, and we kept doing it the same way that it was. And the thing that everyone thought could never leave, you never would have Pittsburgh without steel, left. So we went through 30 years, basically trying to figure out for about the first 10 how we'd bring the mills back. Every politician that ran for office wore a hard hat and said they were going to bring it back. And then about 20 years ago or so, it started to get a little bit more of, well, maybe we should start looking in different ways. But fortunately, there were those sprinkling those seeds back then. People at Carnegie Mellon University like Dick Cyert, who was the president, who said, you know what? We should invest in creating one of the first supercomputing centers in the country. Chancellor Poswar, who said, this whole life science is going to take off. That little facility we have at Western Psych, our medical center, that we call our university medical center, should expand into its own and develop UPMC. And what ended up happening over 30 years, the mills came back, but they moved from down in the rivers up the hills, and they're called Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh, UPMC. And the same battles that people fought back in those days, people like my grandfather who had a 2nd grade education about how can I work. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to work. That was it. He spoke up at a meeting when the CIO was organizing the steel workers at Columbia Steel. And he asked, if I sign, can I work? Because if they didn't have a work order, they were told not to come to work. It's kind of hard to buy food for your family if you don't know if you're going to work that week or not. And all you want to do is work, and he was fired for speaking out. And today we see sort of the same things happening. We have this economy that's taking off, and I can get this air conditioning thing that I might turn on in a second if it gets much hotter in here, and leave it in my office on my chair. And for the next 3.5 years, this city's going to do great. Shadyside's going to expand. The hospitals are going to expand. You're going to see companies from around the world starting to set up operations here for innovation centers. You're going to see all this new economy that's going to take off. You're going to see neighborhoods start to come back, except for 30% of the city, which isn't, because they don't have the ladder of opportunity to be a part of the new economy, because they don't have the same parts that will be seeing investment that will also help the public infrastructure improve. You'll see a city that will be one of great success and one of great failure. And that's where our role comes in. How do we use the limited dollars that we have in order to be able to compel people to do more than just look at one bottom line of profit, but how that profit can help people and how that can help the planet in sustainable ways? And how do we use those economic development dollars to do more than just go into a neighborhood and tear down 5 houses and put a drugstore in with a big surface parking lot, but figure out how we can create jobs and entrepreneurship within the community that will be there for a longer time, and where the money and the wealth will stay here and not be shipped out. We've done a lot of investing over the past 20 years. Some of it's been good and it's seen the economic development come, but some of it hasn't. And we have been so hungry for anything that we look at all development in a way that it's always positive, but it's not. You know, it's like cholesterol. There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Development can both help a community and it can hurt a community. And there needs to be a process by which we hold standards of how we spend taxpayers' money. So what we've done is we've decided to start right from the beginning in this office itself. 1/3 of the staff, 1/3 of the salaries that are going into this office have gone into a new bureau within the mayor's office called the Bureau of Neighborhood Empowerment. And the Bureau of Neighborhood Empowerment targets the communities that have been left behind, communities that haven't had that ladder of opportunity to see the success that's happening in other neighborhoods. And what we're looking to do is not just throw money out or be able to just pave streets and say, well, look what we invested. It's not doing that much when we do that. What we're looking to do is in 4 key areas. Number 1, education. Opportunities all the way, and our goal is prenatal to pre-K. Once they get into the school, they're the superintendents and the school boards. Up until that point, we want to give them a chance to succeed before they hit that 1st grade. Then, after school programmings, then summer opportunities for employment and learning. Every minute that they're not in the schools, they're ours. They're our little burgers. And we're going to make sure that they have an opportunity to succeed. Not just at 12th grade when they get the Pittsburgh Promise, but giving the opportunity by 3rd grade to be able to have an opportunity to make it. Number 2, housing. We want to create models that go beyond what the 60s and 70s produced, basically warehouses of poverty. These big developments that were built in neighborhoods from out-of-town developers, knowing that vouchers would come back from the federal government that would assure a rate of investment that would make them profitable, but would do nothing to create a sense of community. What do we have? Vast amounts of housing all over this city. We have abandoned lots. We have vacant property. We have blighted property that we own. What do we have? 5,000 people on a waiting list right now for affordable housing. How do we connect those two together? Working with nonprofits, faith-based institutions to start to hire people in neighborhoods, fix those places up, teach people building skills, how to do roofing, how to do electrical work, how to do plumbing, while at the same time creating an opportunity, instead of that voucher going to somebody who's from out of state to go in their pockets, to go into equity into the house so that in 15 years they own it. So that when that neighborhood becomes gentrified, because it gets investment, not disinvestment, that they have a stake in it, and if they want to leave, they leave with a big paycheck, and they want to stay, it's their home, they stay. That's how you hit it. I can tell you this about Pittsburgh, that we've seen more people leave this city from disinvestment than from investment. And there's going to be a lot of different things happening in neighborhoods. We want to make sure that people aren't pushed out as a process of that, but have the opportunity to stay and get the rewards of having lived 20, 30, 40 years with seeing nothing but loss. Third area, partners. We need partners. And our partners are not going to be more departments in city government. They are going to be the nonprofits that are on the front lines of addressing these issues in faith-based institutions. And I know a lot of people say, well, there's a separation between church and state, and there is. Not saying to anybody what their faith should be or how they should worship God or if they should worship God. That's up to you. But I can tell you that churches and synagogues and mosques and temples throughout this city are community centers that have the ability to be able to do a lot of work to help at the front basis of helping people and communities. And we need to tap into them and partner with them in a way that we haven't before. So we got education, we've got housing, we've got the outreach to nonprofits and faith-based, and our fourth is entrepreneurs. People have a dream of starting their own businesses. We want to be able to see it happen. We want to build back neighborhood business districts with people who have that dream of starting their own business, give them the safety net of starting it over the course of a couple years when most businesses fail, and to see them become part of that development that creates that type of neighborhood that people seek. People want to be able to live in a community where they can walk down the street and have a neighborhood business district and be able to see and be a part of it. And we want to be able to invest in that kind of development. Imagine the difference between spending $30 million of grant money and loan money to big mega developments that have national retail and huge parking lots as compared to spending $30 million breaking it up into 10 neighborhoods, $3 million grants and microloans of starting small businesses and facade improvements and seeing it spread out into the areas that really need it. We want to change that model. We want to use those limited government dollars in order to see the changes so that everyone has an opportunity to see the success that's going to happen in Pittsburgh. That's the heavy part of the job. The easy part is the groundbreakings and the new housing going up and the new companies coming in and all the other parts that are happening. And we have to really understand, too, that it could take off in a very, very big way. That we could actually start to see this city being recognized as one of the top cities in the world for innovation, technology, medicine, and the ability to do it on a level that could bring companies worldwide here. That's a real possibility. It's right at the doorstep right now. We're doing that to try and do what we can to be welcoming to it. But the second part of that is, how do you balance that where there's need and be able to create opportunity for people? And so that's the challenge. We have the Bureau of Neighborhood Empowerment, and we have the Department of Innovation and Performance. And when we sit together as a staff in our staff meetings, and we do it in this room, I put the challenge out to both, that the moment that we start working and their agendas are the same, we've done it. We've hit it. When the work that Deborah Lamb is doing in innovation and performance and Valerie McDonald Roberts is doing in neighborhood empowerment start to work off of one page, we've done it. We're not there. We got a lot of work to do to get there. But there's enough potential right now and enough talent in this city that if any city's going to do it, it's going to be us. I mean, this city is small. We're able to be nimble and get things done rather quickly. And there's a lot of interest and love in order to try and get these types of things done, from the biggest corporations to the smallest nonprofits. And it's starting to happen. Now, I'm apologizing because I'm going to run out to another event up at Carlow University, but before I go, I wanted to say this too. What you're doing is immeasurably important. There's a lot of people who will complain. There's a lot of people on Twitter who will complain, and I read it. I've never blocked anybody, despite what one person said. And I won't. I mean, I want to hear what the criticism is, even though I get very thin-skinned sometime, and I will Google search certain people. There's probably a direct correlation to the people who will complain, why isn't anybody doing anything to fix these roads? And then when they have to wait because the trucks are out repaving, going, why are they doing and fixing these roads? You know, and I realize that. And that sort of drags everyone down. We all deal with it, and it's sort of the thing that pulls us. But at the same time, there are those that are willing to say, Why won't anyone fix those roads? What can I do to make it better? That's what you're doing. You're going to give your time. You're going to get full access. I mean, you'll get to see all the different parts of what the city government does. And what I want to hear back from you at the end of this is what we can do to do it better. I want ideas. I want positive, reinforcing ideas. Not saying, you guys are doing great, but you can say, you guys are doing great, but you need to really look at this. You know, when I talked to the chief of police about this, I was surprised when he said, or when the director of public works told me, I really don't understand why you're not doing it. Or within the law department and the way that you're doing your investigations, I want to hear some positive things come back that are challenging us to do better. And what I can assure you is once you get an informed look into city government, your opinions in those questions will be going directly to the top. So, and me too. The top's really my directors. I've learned that in the first year. Thank you again, and I do appreciate it. I know that, Sally, are you going to give a tour of the city council chambers today?
Yes, well, our second half is in there.
Okay. When you look up, I want you to look at the names. In the top of the ceiling are the names of every mayor for the first 100 years. And it starts all the way in the very, very front with Ebenezer Denny. And you'll be able to look all the way around, and you'll see these beautiful wreaths with names like Beltshoover and Mondstooth and Lawrenceville. And you know what they were? Boroughs and townships of their own that we annexed to create the city of Pittsburgh that we know today. And all of those are in the first 100-year history. And this building was built for that anniversary of 1816. In 1916 it was commissioned, in 1917 it was built to celebrate Pittsburgh's first 100 years. And next year we get to celebrate 200. And we don't have any money to build any buildings. So what we'll do is we'll put together a committee and we'll find 200 ways to celebrate in every neighborhood, within all of our big cultural institutions. We'll ask everybody to throw their own way of celebrating Pittsburgh. We'll put it together in an app, 200 Reasons to Party. And you'll be able to get on and look and say, hey, here's a great way to celebrate. And we'll invite everyone to that party, because that's the way we do it in Pittsburgh. So, thanks, guys.